Hi, I'm Chike Coleman, that's Sanford Hess, and this is Real Reviews Home Edition, the show where we talk about film and sometimes other stuff. This week, we're going to be talking about two films that really are not related at all. We just felt like watching something interesting and unique, but I'm now going to coin this month Martial Arts May, which means every show will be reviewing a different martial arts film. Um, Along with a film that is completely unrelated to martial arts, just to have a little bit of a balance.
I like it.
Which these two films, uh, one is in balance and one is out of balance, but I won't tell you which is which. The first of which is Vivarium, starring Jesse Eisenberg and Imogen Poots. They play a loving, genuine couple who is trying to find a new home, and they get to a real estate office where they meet a real estate agent to look at houses, uh, and they end up in this community where they end up in what I would describe as the too perfect 1950s house.
Wait, I think it's important to note that the way that they end up at this, they're checking out the house. It's not that they've bought the house; it's they're
No,
checking
they're
it out.
checking it out.
Right, and he says, "Hey, follow me in your car," and they said, "Well, okay, whatever." So they follow him out there in their car, but strangely, nobody else is there in that housing development.
No, and while they find this strange, they really don't see the harm in just checking things out. Unfortunately, what follows is them being left there and then being given a set of instructions, essentially. And they basically realize after a while that they are just stuck there. And then you have an event that is so bizarre that I can't even put it to words. A baby is left on their doorstep that they're told that they have to take care of. Jesse Eisenberg is like, F this. We're not this kid's parents. Um, we don't really have any responsibility to be here. We need to continue to try and find a way out. And throughout the film, you see him slowly trying to find different ways to manipulate this environment that they're in to escape, only for Imogen Pooch's character to just kind of, I would guess, slowly be resigned to her surroundings and to the idea of being a mother to this child. Now, obviously, in infancy, she's not going to grasp that heavy to the child, but Jesse Eisenberg's slow, contained outburst kind of latch her more toward the child, and the child grows up fairly quickly, we'll say.
No, very quickly. I mean, I
Yeah,
think that
well, yeah,
they
fairly quickly is an understatement.
right. So I mean, they kind of have a point where it's like 98 days, and he's essentially like an 8 or 9 year old. And they kind of they quickly cut from it being an infant to this next scene where the child is like 8 or 9, but then they say it's like 98 days in. So obviously it's growing at a very quick rate.
Indeed. So watching Imogen Poots mother this young child, who we quickly find out is not any normal young child, uh, was straight up frightening to me. Just watching her, slowly develop these routines with this kid, and this kid learning to mimic both Imogen Poots' character and Jesse Eisenberg's character. Really creepy. Eisenberg's resolve to get out of the environment he's in is amazing. I think the two actors, when they do share a lot of screen time together in the beginning, are great. And as they drift apart, you kind of believe them as a couple and as the dysfunction uh, partnership that it is. But I have to say, this movie just straight up creeped me out, but I love that it did.
Which part
Sanford,
creeped you out?
um, everything that Jesse Eisenberg was trying to discover, including the fact that he tried to burn the house once. That
Yeah,
was
right,
hilarious.
right. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I think it's
what
worth
happened to
noting.
Imogen Poots was hilarious. The fact that she saw other couples struggling through the same thing because she dug a little bit too deep.
Right.
Um,
So here I want to explain for the audience that you have to just take a huge leap of faith with this movie. I mean, this movie quickly goes into the realm of straight out fantasy.
right.
For example, I think the point where it starts with that was, as you mentioned, they follow this real estate agent to the housing community, and he's showing them the house, and then he vanishes. And
Yeah.
so they basically say, "Hey, Chike, you're frozen."
Yeah, I just saw that. I don't know
All
why
right,
I'm frozen.
there we go. So they say, basically, oh, good, that guy's gone. Let's get in the car and just get out of here. And then in a great commentary on these suburban, sort of housing developments, they drive around for the rest of the day trying to find their way out, and they keep winding up back at the same house.
Yep.
And that was actually one of the early scenes that I really liked. Was they did such a great job showing that time lapse of them driving around all day with kind of overlapping statements, where they're arguing back and forth, and he wants to drive, and it was a very realistic kind of male female dynamic. And then ultimately, after driving around all day, they run out of gas and they're right back where they started from, in front of the same house, which obviously is not believable, but again is where you have to sort of give this film to say, okay, that's fine, whatever. You actually touched upon one of the other scenes I liked in the same way. Imogen Poots sort of follows the kid who's now grown up to be an adult, and goes through a series of what seem to be other houses with other people caring for the same kind of children, and in almost a dream sequence. And I thought that was a really cool sequence. So
Yeah.
but again, it didn't make any sense from a realistic perspective. Like, where was she? Who are these people? Is this an alternate reality? I mean, you just got to say, okay, whatever, I accept this movie on its face value.
But what I found interesting is when she was going through trying to follow the kid, and she was trying to follow the kid, we should tell the audience, because she was trying to figure out where he went to, because he said he went out and she didn't know where that was, because obviously to her there's nowhere else to go.
Right.
So where did the kid go?
And she said she wants to solve this mystery. So it kind of gave her a heroic quest as a character, is to figure out what is going on.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
They showed one thing that I didn't see in terms of the relationship between Jesse Eisenberg and Imogen Poots' character. They showed another couple in the throes of passion, which I was like, I didn't even think about that being a thing within the lives of people caring for this child or what the child would be doing. But they basically showed that for a brief second, and then showed what other points of madness, this child reduced their parents to.
Right. Which, and the breakdown of, them, and you mentioned Jesse Eisenberg and kind of his quest to find a way out, which ultimately sort of manifests itself as his manic ditch digging, which,
Yeah.
I got to say, I felt like that was kind of a lame subplot. I don't know, this sort of constant digging. I got to say, I'm not a huge Jesse Eisenberg fan. And
I'm not either.
Yeah, I really didn't buy him as a handyman who knows how to dig ditches kind of guy.
I don't either.
So
here's the thing.
Yeah.
His manic state, for me, because I've seen him in The Social Network, I've seen him as Lex Luthor in the Batman Superman movie, and whatever else he did with that. This was the first time where I kind of found that performance that he usually does somewhat believable. But the fact that you had to take him way, way out into this crazy 1950s house to get that performance to actually stick, no offense to the guy, I'm sure he's a great person, shows how poor of a performer he actually is.
Right. And I had the opposite reaction. I was like, yeah, it's Jesse Eisenberg playing Jesse Eisenberg, and it really sticks out poorly in this. I mean, also the fact that they never explain his American accent, even though they're apparently in, I think in England, because,
yeah.
But that being said, yeah, I did. I mean, I agree with you. I think he did have some good chemistry with Imogen Poots, but I would give her more credit for that than him.
Correct. Like,
Yeah.
she goes through like a range of emotions. His is just anger and denial the whole way through.
Right. Hey, but let's give some huge props. The kid who plays the 8-year-old
Oh
was
man,
fabulous. That kid was so creepy. And I mean,
the thing with the throat alone.
well, yeah. But I mean, just in general, the way that, having, being a parent, I could really associate with the horror of the idea of this kid who just, the only way that he could express himself and sometimes was just screaming that high-pitched scream, until they got his cereal poured and stuff like that. That is exactly what it's like to deal with an infant sometimes.
Yeah.
But, here you have an 8-year-old with an 8-year-old's voice and who can also, like you said, mimic them and to make fun of them. So I thought that kid was great. Now, obviously, it wasn't the kid mimicking the voices, but still, the kid was incredibly creepy and very good.
Yeah.
So.
That kid has a bright future doing some other horror or sci-fi work for sure.
Yeah, I think he can take over the Crispin Glover parts once he gets.
Oh, that's a very good call. Yes.
Hey, but okay, so now let's get to the real problem here. This movie is really creepy given the context of the pandemic and the shelter at home.
Yeah.
I mean, this movie came out before any of the coronavirus, and yet the whole movie is about a couple who's trapped at home and can't leave and have a child who's driving them crazy, which I think a lot of people could, relate to in this time of pandemic.
Exactly.
Did you pick this on purpose for that?
No, I did not. I picked it for the sake of when I watched the movie, I loved the relationship dynamics between Eisenberg, Poots, and the child.
Yeah.
And then to know the unsettling stuff that came later, I was just like, oh, yes. And it also, in a weird way, reminded me of another movie, which we will never, ever review. Mother.
Oh.
Starring Jennifer Lawrence and Javier Bardem.
Is that Aronofsky?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I actually have not seen that, so we will not review. Maybe we'll review that one day. But yeah, still.
You really will have to sit me down and say, Chike, I really want to see this because
got to tie you to the chair.
Hard to stomach. But It reminded me a lot of that as well, for reasons that will become apparent when you ever actually see Mother.
Okay. Well, it was creepy enough given the pandemic, and honestly, if there was one reason I would recommend this movie, because I would not otherwise.
Okay. Would
be. It's so crazy to watch this in the context of what's going on right now with people sheltering at home.
Yeah. Okay.
Would you recommend this movie?
No. I wouldn't recommend it, but it is an entertaining watch when there's nothing else to watch.
Okay, fair enough.
Like, if you have nothing else on your watch list docket and you want to watch a movie, and you have some shrooms or some MJ that you can digest beforehand and then watch this, yeah, go ahead and see Vivarium. You're going to get a real big kick out of it.
All right.
For sure.
Well, and I guess the only thing I would add to Chike's statement is that make sure you see it while we're still sheltering in place, because I think this movie's going to lose a step once.
Yeah, it's not going to have its same power and effect if we're not in these same circumstances. Having said that, enjoy the chaos of that movie, and on to the chaos of a completely different film, directed by Stanley Tong, entitled Supercop, starring Jackie Chan and Michelle Yeoh. So this is kind of a difficult one to explain.
Let me take a crack at this one.
How about that? Go for it.
Yeah, it's been a while since you've thrown this at me, but so Supercop starts with an introduction of us to Jackie Chan's character, who is a detective, and he is the Supercop. That's his nickname. He's a boxing / kung fu / everything else expert who seems to have an incredible track record as a cop, and at the beginning of the movie is being sent off on a very dangerous mission undercover. So the movie starts with him going to China from Hong Kong. And remember that this movie was made in 1992 before Hong Kong became part of China again. So at this point, it was a separate country entirely. And he goes to China, where he's paired up with Michelle Yao as a local security expert in order to take this undercover assignment. The undercover assignment begins by him helping free a prisoner from a prison camp. And his part in that becomes important because he is the person who guides this prisoner out of the prison camp. Now, that bonds the two together, and the prisoner who's now escaped brings Jackie Chan with him. And then, in a very weird kind of commentary on what's going on, they decide to go shelter at Jackie Chan's home place, which is in Wuhan, China. Did you catch that part?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there you go. So they go to his home in Wuhan, where there's a whole, which is actually a really great scene. Because, Jackie Chan is he's like, oh God, I don't even know where I'm going. And, but they've set up a whole pretend family, including Michelle Yao, his security, lead, as his pretend sister. Well, soon enough, the sister becomes embroiled in the whole process. And this bad guy brings both Jackie Chan and Michelle Yao, this brother and sister combination, with him to Hong Kong, where they then get integrated into the gang, leading to a number of different incidents, which we'll talk about in a minute. And finally, to this huge conclusion where, in essence, they are trying to free the wife of the gang leader from her prison in Malaysia. Unfortunately, Jackie Chan gets exposed, and ultimately, there's a huge fight scene on a moving train with a helicopter, and a conclusion in which Supercop comes out okay. How's that?
I am so surprised you actually got through that. Please tell me you have Wikipedia pulled up, because there's no way I would have been able to safely do that.
No. Well, with this kind of movie, you just have to, plot-wise, I think the plot was actually my least favorite part of this movie because, hey, it's a Jackie Chan movie. There are big holes in the plot, but I did like that they actually tried to come up with some type of plot because some of his movies are really sparse on that. So the idea of him going undercover and actually, and I guess here's one of my complaints of the plot points. They really didn't explain how this whole prison break came to be, whether it was something they planned entirely, which would have been pretty cool, or if it was something that they learned about and then sort of inserted him into. But, that's like one of those places where they just could have paused for 45 seconds and had someone say, hey, we've been working on this. We've planted all this stuff. We've done all this preparation for you to be inserted. But they just skip right past that and jump into the action scene.
Okay. So I have to start my opinion with a question.
Yes.
Which version of this movie did you watch?
The dubbed version. If that's what you mean, subtitles versus dubbed?
So the English dub, correct?
Yes.
I also watched the English dub, but the reason I asked that is because before I watched the English dub, I found the original version.
Okay.
And there's scenes missing that probably would have been more cohesive. Like they talk about the war on drugs that this guy leads. They talk about why they need a super cop in the first place.
Okay.
Those are conversations that are held. It's like a good 3-minute scene in the beginning of the movie before Jackie Chan comes riding in on his motorbike. I'm going to be frank about this. I hate this movie.
Okay. Ooh,
a lot.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Because of the things you just mentioned. It's incoherent. It's messy. By the time you actually get to something that might be coherent in the story, which means that somebody's gotten kidnapped and Jackie has to save them, in this case his girlfriend that we meet earlier on for 5 seconds in the film, you've lost all investment in the audience, I think. For me, is Jackie Chan a great martial artist? Absolutely. Do I want to see him do every move in his repertoire when he's fighting people? and be funny at the same time? Absolutely. Is this a good showcase of that? Not a chance in hell. It's not really that enjoyable. Everything is so jumbled. The comedy doesn't land. None of it really works as a whole for me. And I'll tell you why. Um, I've seen weaker plotted movies than this that have equally as good action, starring Jackie Chan or starring Jet Li, where everything works within the film because it's not about a lack of commitment, it's about knowing your pacing. And this movie just runs and runs as fast as it can all the time through its 90 minutes. There's no point where you get to feel bad that Jackie is on this mission by himself, essentially a lone wolf with a security guard.
Michelle
Other
Yeoh. Yeah.
you don't get a chance to slow down and be like, oh crap, this really is dangerous for Jackie. He really doesn't have a way out, and comedy is not going to do it for him every time. You don't really ever fear for him as a character within this film, and I think the lack of stakes, despite the great action, is what really paralyzes this film completely. Um, and I might add that his girlfriend in the film is super annoying.
Well, I mean, that's I probably partly I mean, she's a one-sided character, but she seems to be there just, for in order to be there for a plot purpose at the end. Look, I'm going to agree with you about this. I think there are many, many better Jackie Chan movies, and hopefully we'll watch some more of them in May now that I know about this. But, I will say that it's not his best movie at all in terms of stunts. It's not his best movie in terms of crazy creative fight sequences, because the fight sequences themselves are actually, except for maybe the train one, they're pretty straightforward. I did think that Michelle Yeoh was amazing, though. I mean, her scenes I liked a lot more than anybody else. I thought she had good charisma, and as a martial artist, I really liked a lot of the stuff that she was doing. I thought it was cool that she was, that she was such a kick-ass fighter.
I
So
mean,
I was just trying to find maybe an upshot of this was I really liked her performance, but
for me, it was more her movie than his.
in which case, great, but
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
I agree with you that, having learned that maybe there's a sort of the longer version, which was the, obviously when they made it for the American audience, they probably cut out what they thought was just exposition and just cut to the fight scenes. But yeah, if there was 10 or 15 more minutes of explanation, I think that would improve this movie significantly. Because really,
I'll send you the link to what they cut out, and you'll be able to read what you missed out on.
yeah.
But for me, Jackie Chan is a great performer. My problem is that a lot of his early movies, he doesn't really get a chance to emote. Like, there's a scene early on in the film where Michelle Yeoh has a vest strapped to her body, which we learn is a package with a bomb on it. And we're worried about her the whole time, whether or not, she's going to get shot and it's going to explode and she's going to die, as well as anybody in the surrounding vicinity. At the end of that whole sequence of them shooting up the bad guys, punching, fighting, kicking the bad guys, she gets shot by the main big boss. And you think, well, she's going to die, but it was a bluff. But when she got shot and Jackie ran over to her and was like, "Are you okay?" Didn't feel a dang on thing.
Yeah. Well,
And that's because neither character was fleshed out.
And in his other movies, I mean, I think, I mean, saying that it shows emotion, I'm trying to think of a couple of movies where to me, it's more of the comedy. I mean, there wasn't as much of him showing off that part of his personality in this film as there are in some other films. And I
like
think
Operation Condor being one of them.
Yeah, and my favorite, I think, still to this day is Who Am I? Because when he has a chance to show the broad range of what he can do, it's a much more satisfying film. So
I will say this, one other small point. When Jackie Chan films as a whole treat it more like an ensemble than just Jackie and someone else, the film becomes exponentially better in terms of its dynamic, in terms of its pacing, and in terms of its approach. When you have just Jackie Chan and Michelle Yeoh, and you don't flush out the city or the environment he's in, mistakes like Supercop happen. With that said, we will be back next week with another new movie, which we'll decide on later, and another martial arts flick, which we'll decide on later. And until then, guys, stay safe, wash your hands, stay inside, and we'll see you in our homes at the movies. Bye, guys.